Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Metzler. We're here tonight with some amazing guests. First of all, Joy and I would like to welcome George Anthony and Dr. Tiffany McCalla. She is an emergency room MD. I mean, wait till you hear the resume on this woman and George Anthony, the things that they're doing in the world right now. It's amazing. So Tiffany is a mom of two, and she also has a side business where she helps people with platelet rich plasma, which we'll get into and we'll share. People with injuries can use it, people with hair loss. It's something that is a passion of hers. And I'm just so excited to be here. George Anthony is in law enforcement for over 20 years. He is also a motivational coach and an author. He wrote an amazing book called Bulletproof Mindset. And Joy McAdams, Joy, so happy to be here together with these two amazing, inspirational individuals. So I'm going to hand it over to you. And I know we have so many questions to dive into.
We sure do. And this is what I love. I want to have, and I want to surround myself with people, I always reference it, that have a high baseline, right? So when I'll tell you, both of you, when I have a stressful day, one of the ways I bring myself down is I'm like, well, it's not like I'm a physician in an ER, and it's not like I'm a police officer dealing, like wondering if I'm going to live through this next call. So what am I stressed about? You know what I'm saying? And it's because both of you have such a higher baseline than the average profession. And so that's why we wanted to have you all on, because I think once we can tap into what it takes to function at a baseline as high as what you both face, we can all learn so much from that. And it helps us be able to come back and deal with stress, in a better way. So one of the first things we wanted to talk about is, how do you manage it all? How do you face trauma? Both of you face trauma and risking your life and come home and leave it, there. How do you manage all of that? I guess is one of my first questions. I'll start with you, George.
You know what? I'm a gentleman, so, I can wait. You can start with the doctor first, let her take this, and I can answer after she finishes.
Okay, what a gentleman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Anthony. For me, I've been in emergency medicine a couple of years. I want to date myself, but, and initially I found it really difficult, and it took me a little bit of time to kind of get in the swing and see what it is. But here's the key for me. I love my life outside of work, right? And I love my work life. So they're actually two completely separate things, and I try to keep them that way. It's difficult though. Sometimes you have a really tough day. It is hard to turn that off. One thing that I do I learned two tricks. So one is I stop for many moments of mindfulness, just many moments, because in the ER, you don't necessarily have, 2 hours to digest someone having a trauma and then going into, someone with a rash. You don't have that time all the time. But just completely stopping, if you're in the bathroom, if you are in the hallway, and kind of focus internally and take 3 deep breaths. And each time you exhale a little bit of the stress. And that's my reset. So I use that technique a lot. 3 deep breaths. I use it with my kids. It works. It's great. I love it. Outside of that, I think just kind of practicing mindfulness and just being focused very specifically on what you're doing and trying to be present in the moment so you don't miss them, because our lives are finite as far as we know. And there's so many moments. And if you're super focused on the next thing or what just happened, you miss what's going on right now. So that's how I do it.
That's good. That's good. Good.
Well, I think the biggest difference when it comes to law enforcement is that figuring out how to turn it off. Because when you are at work, you're dealing with the stresses there. But even when you're off work, you're dealing with those stressors of if anything happens in front of you, that you have to take action. When you go into a restaurant, you sit yourself tactically so you can see who's coming and going. When you go into a movie theater, you're sitting to see who comes in and goes out, the egress and ingress. So you're constantly looking at these things tactically. You're looking at people that walk by you to see if they are acting funny or have a bulge. So when it comes to law enforcement, those stressors, it's if you constantly are dealing with a lot of distress, not really eustress, distress, because you're constantly you're heightened because you're looking at everything. And what I've learned after the fact of being here 20 years, going through personal development, is that what I do personally, I take the time into taking those moments. So when I learned how to fly an airplane, I love watching the sunrise. So after I get finished with my roll call, I will walk outside and just take time, take a deep breath, and just enjoy the sunrise, because I know that there's somebody that's waking up. Well, I'm sorry, someone did not wake up that day and can't see this sunrise. When I get home, what I do now is I make sure that I take that time for myself, to re-energize myself. With me, I believe in a lot of meditation. I believe in binaural beats, listening to different beats to change my brain waves when it comes to relaxation. So it centers me and grounds me. Again, this may not work for everyone, but this is what I use when it comes to getting myself back and making sure that I'm pouring back into my cup, because we're constantly pouring out.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. Really, really good. And then I want to move on to another question, because I know both of you probably work at times on call, which Cindy and I could probably not relate to that, being on call. That's even hard to fathom, how do you plan anything? But when it comes to your work, life, health, and I don't even like to call it balance. I've really rephrased it with collaboration. I see it as a seesaw where some days work is up, some days, family is down, and then vice versa. And as long as you keep teetering this seesaw, back and forth and have open communication, then that's how you can collaborate it all together, because balance is almost impossible and you're going to feel frustrated. So how do you guys really fit within, I know you have young kids still, Dr. Tiffany, how do you, do that collaboration between family, work, life, and health, keeping up with your health and your fitness as well? I mean, all of those factors come into play to make you a whole person.
Well, hopefully one day I'll get to the Grand Canyon and I'll be able to tell you about that experience and how I was able to walk through it and whatever. Being honest, it is difficult. So no one promised life was going to be easy. It's just a matter that you have the opportunity to live it, that's a big opportunity. I do have small kids and I'm very passionate about my family. I make conscious choices in what I do, and I have a very specific way that I order things. Families first, in my book. And I think that helps to keep me grounded. Sometimes it means that I don't do other things because I try to prioritize my boys and my husband. The other thing that's really big for me specifically, I think having a partner that kind of is supportive. So we're all on the same team over here. That was actually a really, really big deal to have that support. And it allows me to really focus in on whatever it is I'm focusing on at that time. I actually had a mom, so I have a third grader now. And last year, I text for play dates all the time. I'm not a super scheduled person. Like I don't have everything on a schedule. I'm an ER doc. You have to be able to go with the flow. You have to be able to improvise,
Right,
So I texted this mom and I said, hey, we'd love to meet up for a play date at the park. We're available today. We're available tomorrow. And she was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then she said, she called me back and she said, you work? And I was like, yeah, actually, I do. I'm an ER doctor. And she's like, you text and you're so good at keeping up. I didn't even know that. I thought you were at home like me. Nothing wrong with stay-at-home moms, but I think that if you put everything in its place and you define whatever the importance is for you, you're able to make those things work.
So. That's a big compliment. Like as a working mom, we can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Good for you. That's awesome. That's awesome.
And what about you, George? I know that it's your schedule is like all over the place and you work overtime, you get called all the time. So fill us in on what your secret is.
Yes. Well, when I was married, I was dealing more with the ego than, I wasn't as open when it came to communication. It was more, my focus was on my job. You know, I was a narcotics sergeant. I was flying off to Jamaica. I was doing undercover deals. So when I had those on-call, when I had to be called out, those things are very fluid, especially dealing with narcotics. So, you know, even though my family was important to me, I prioritized, oh man, I got to go do this here. I'm in this, you know, specialized unit. But hindsight is 2020, you know, family is important. Those things that I start to miss, you know, especially going through my divorce and looking at my pictures and seeing, you know, my ex, my kids at Disney and at Universal, and I'm not there because I'm at work. You know, that's what really made me come to realize that, hold on, I've been prioritizing the wrong thing. I've been placing emphasis on something that really isn't going to give me back the time that I'm actually putting in. And what really mattered was putting in those times and engaging in those special moments that I was missing out on. So you're right now, because of COVID, I really have no choice, you know, because we have people that's going out of work that's testing positive. And, you know, Cindy, it was, and Joy, it was more so I had to work because I was the only supervisor that was able to fill in that had not tested positive as of yet, you know, knock on wood. You know, I have not been, I've been around people that's been exposed, but I have not tested positive. I have not contracted the disease at all, even though it was people around me that have. But my priority now is being home. My priority now is owning my own time so that I can start to create or make up for those memories and those things that I lost quickly, rather than enjoying those special little moments with, you know, my kids or my wife and engaging in that communication where two people are on the same pathway. That unfortunately I missed that boat. However, I'm trying to make up for it now because now I recognize that, hey, you know what?
You have a big
job
family.
is just a job.
You have a big family.
The job is a job, but right now, when it comes to recognizing and prioritizing those things, if it's left up to me, I'd rather be home right now than actually be at work when it comes to dealing to on calls. That's why I'm back on the road. I'm a road sergeant now, and I'm not in a specialized unit to where I'm subject to the call outs, right? Now I go work my 12 hours, I come home and I don't have to worry about anything unless there's somebody that's out with COVID, sick, vacation, and they ask me to cover the shift. Then it's my choice whether or not I want to, whether to be mandated to.
That's good. That's a good lesson for all. That's a good lesson.
Well, two other really big topics that we wanted to touch on. One was the fact that both of you, with everything on your plate, you still find the time for, like, we'll say side hustle, because so many people right now are reinventing themselves and looking for things and wanting to turn their, you know, basically their career into a passion. And both of you, and maybe you could just share a little bit, you know, I know with you, George, you know, you have a passion for helping people, for coaching people, for, you know, and Tiffany, with you obviously, you know, you learned about all these different modalities and you want to be able to help people too. So maybe we'll start with you, Tiffany, and you can share like how that came to be and basically how you're able to manage that and fit it all in.
Well, still working on fitting it all in all at the same time. So I do believe that you can do everything. I just don't believe you can do them all at the same time, right? So, because then you miss all these other moments. You have to be focused and centered and mindful about what you're doing right at that time. So a couple of years ago, well, as Neurodoc, I said, man, yeah, this is great. I love it. And then, wow, you know, I don't know that I'll be able to do this forever and ever. So what does that look like for me? What is that transition going to be like? I don't plan to stop emergency medicine anytime soon. I think it's great. But what I did find, like, for example, someone comes in with like something like a sinusitis, say, right? And then they walk out with 4 or 5 prescriptions, which is crazy. Whereas, you know, maybe if they started 2 weeks earlier, they could have just used an neti pot. So what I realized is that I believe our bodies are perfectly made. I believe that we're perfectly created, and that we are able to do so much more than we know as like neurology progresses and neuropsychiatry and that kind of stuff. We see our brain, you know, is kind of in charge of a lot more than we realize. I do have a very strong faith. With that being said, I really do believe that we have all the healing blocks and tools already. So I got into this PRP stuff. I heard about it and I was like, well, I guess it, yeah, let me see what it is. And the more I delved, the more pages I turned, the more fascinated I was when I saw athletes like getting up and moving quickly, you know, after a major injury, to be able that cutting that recovery time. There are PRP applications in infertility, PRP applications in ocular medicine for ophthalmology. So it's all over now. My specific application is I deal mainly with aesthetics and sexual health, and the improvements that I've seen in people it's just amazing. So to be able to bring people, my marriage is very important to me. And I think that intimacy is important, right? We're intimate with, you know, our families, with your children, with your spouse, with your parents and that kind of thing. But they're all different types. But the intimacy relationship in a marriage is super important. And I actually have several friends that have suffered silently because no one ever said anything until I got into the business. Like, well, yeah, you know, we haven't had sex in 5 years. I'm like, 5 years? It's a really long time. When you look at the divorce proceedings, impotence is listed like in 40%. It's crazy. It matters. So being able to express yourself intimately in that way to the people that are closest to you is really a big thing. And so being able to help people maintain that type of relationship and connection it makes me happy to do that, because for me, it's brought me so much joy to be able to share that with my husband, that level of intimacy. So that's my PRP thing, you know, and people have had great results. So, you know, I love it. I'm very happy with it. And then, you know, aesthetically speaking, I have dark skin, right? There's no surprise here. A lot of the cosmetics and a lot of the applications are made for people with lighter skin. It's easier to treat. Well, there's no worry about, you know, hyperpigmentation after a PRP treatment because it's your own blood, right? So you're able to use your own body, which I believe is perfectly and fearfully made, to be able to repair itself. And so anyway, that's how I fell into it, and I love it. So
amazing.
It is. And Big G, Anthony, share a little background about how you got into, you know, your passion, coaching, motivating.
Yes. Well, all of this happened through my bottoming out when it came to me going through my divorce, when it came to financial issues, when it came to professional issues, all coming in at once. And, you know, drinking alcohol and, you know, having those dark thoughts that at one point in time, after I went over and had a big argument with my ex-wife, I went over to the house, I punched holes in the wall and all this other stuff like that because I was so enraged, so frustrated that I felt I was losing control, no one I could talk to. But that night, I also went back and I thought about ending my own life. And, you know, obviously I'm sitting here right now, I didn't do it, but what it made me think about the very next morning was that I remembered this saying from Les Brown, is that you're where you are today because you made an appointment to be there. So what I believe that what most people don't do, they don't take accountability and onus of decisions that they made in the past is giving them the results that they're getting right now. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I had to face that. You know, it was not just my ex-wife's fault that I was in this situation. It was decisions that I made. It was listening to the ego rather than being more in tune with her and communicating with her and being able to understand and being a little bit more empathetic. And I think through law enforcement, a lot of us get this way when it comes to becoming callous, becoming cynical, because of the things that we see on a daily basis. And at that point in time, I started doing research on suicides when it comes to law enforcement. You know, last year there was over 230 officers that took their lives. In 2018, it was over 187. This year we're at about 237 now. Mm-hmm. So it's a very big problem in law enforcement when it comes to suicide. It's a very big problem in law enforcement when it comes to alcoholism. It's a very big problem in law enforcement when it comes to high divorce rate. It's a very big problem in law enforcement when it comes to depression. And it's not really talked about. It's like that little silent elephant in the room to where, hey, you get into this profession, you see these negative things on a daily basis. How do you cope? How do you continue? How do you go from being so energetic when it comes to getting into this job, wanting to help people, and you get 15 years in, you become so cynical and disgruntled and angry and frustrated? How does that transition happen? So with that being said, that's how I wrote my book called The Bulletproof Mindset. It was more therapeutic for me. It took me through that walk of where I started from and where I ended up, and the changes I had to make as an individual. I think what we don't talk about a lot, especially in law enforcement, I think is more so needed in law enforcement, is personal development. You know, they teach us a skill, they teach us techniques of how to go out and clear buildings and do traffic stop safety. But when it comes to continuously building yourself, you don't get that. And what most people do, they settle. So that's how I got into the coaching and the motivational speaking, because I want to be able to put this out here to let not only law enforcement, but first responders, that's ER, medical professionals, firefighters, or anyone that's out there that goes through this trauma on a daily basis, that there are ways that you can go out and seek help. See, a lot of us, when we get into this profession, we're a type A personality. We think that we can deal with this ourselves. We think that we internalize a lot of these traumas ourselves, and we don't reach out to individuals that can possibly help us. So,
and you don't want to share weakness either, probably. You probably don't want to share weakness either. And that's unfortunate. Because, yeah, we're all human.
Yeah, you know what else
Exactly.
I can say? I think that when you start talking about things and being open and candid, you realize that your experience is not isolated.
Exactly.
So many people have the same experience, and there's power and safety in that voice, right? So as opposed to, you know, kind of being silenced, it normalizes you, so you don't feel so, you know, by yourself.
Exactly. And Dr. Tiffany, just to let you know, that I have this saying that in order to heal, you must reveal. You know,
Absolutely.
you have to reveal those traumas. You know, you have to reveal those things in order to face them and now come up with a solution to correct them. And that's what a lot of us don't do in this profession. We do not reveal those traumas because it's looked at as a weakness. It's looked, oh, you're talking to this therapist? Oh, why are you talking to this therapist? I can't trust you now. You know, you're weak mentally, you know. So because of the stigma that's being placed on it, nobody wants to seek help, and they go to coping when it comes to the alcoholism. They go to coping when it comes to being enraged and frustrated and dealing with all this internal trauma. Now, the only way they can express it is through hostility instead of being able to get it out in a more productive way. So that's my passion, is to get this out here, to let first responders know that there are ways that, you know, it's okay to talk. You're not weak talking about issues. They actually make you stronger.
You have to talk about issues. You have to, because if you don't, that's like the first step towards the wrong direction, I think.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So this is so good.
That's how I got into it. Sorry if you long-winded.
No, we're going to wrap up, but just on that note about, you know, talking about things, we'd be kind of remiss without mentioning, you know, the social justice issues that are going on. And just, you know, I know, George, Anthony, we talked a little bit about this with Joy too, just how it is really about having conversations and opening up the conversations. And sometimes for some people, they're difficult conversations, but I feel like both of you probably have, I know, George, you have so much insight on this, and Tiffany, you do too. So I'd love to just have a couple words from each of you, you know, some recommendations, a little bit of sharing regarding that before we wrap up.
Go ahead, Doc, you can go first.
I'm not used to always going first. That's fine though. So about social injustice. Let's say, so when this COVID thing started, so I'm going back to COVID. I'm over COVID, just like everybody else, believe me. You know, I'm like so over COVID. I'm hoping COVID doesn't cancel my 2022 plans at this point. But I'll tell you, when COVID started, I got a call. Hey, can you talk about Black people are dying more of COVID? What's going on there? So it started to illuminate some of the things that have been going on. It just now everyone's home and looking at it all at the same time, right? And so then you see these really unfortunate incidents that happened throughout the country. There's not just one, multiple different things, and the response by multiple different groups. So everything was kind of very polarized. And I found myself in a difficult position. So I'm the president of the subchapter of the National Medical Association, T. Leroy Jefferson Medical Society. So I found myself sitting around early thinking, what am I doing? I'm sitting here looking at these I've got two boys, and I'm, like, man, I haven't even, I'm looking at people on TV and I'm like, how do they even get there? And I took a stand. And so myself with two other young women, like one from my sorority, I'm also, an active member of Town Pearls of Wellington, active in Jack and Jill. So I said, you know what, I'm going to use the people that I know, and we organized a rally. So what was the point of this? We got together and it was about 500 people in Rivera Beach. It was peaceful, but giving people a voice. And so what I found, just like what you were saying before, George Anthony, about people kind of being silenced and not having their voice, I think that is the important thing. So the first step is to be able to have a voice and to be able to express yourselves. Everyone doesn't have to agree. Everyone will never agree, right? The four of us on this call together, I'm sure we can pick 5 issues and maybe we'll agree on a few of them, maybe. But the bottom line is that the conversation needs to happen, because at the baseline, I believe that we live in an amazing country and we have amazing leadership, although people go about the leading differently. I do believe that we are always stronger together than we are apart. And so when you put issues in that polarize or divide people, you will create a catastrophe. If you look across history, centuries, you look at like the Mayan empires, you look at what happened in Germany, you look at what happened with Genghis Khan. I mean, there's always some division. So I think that if we want this country to be amazing, an amazing experience for our kids and grandkids, and, 5 and 6 generations later, we're a young country, right? So it's only, a couple hundred years old. If we want this to be able to go on through antiquity, we have to take the steps now, because if you look at every other civilization that kind of went down, it's because there was all this division. So I'm about unity. I believe that love conquers hate. And I think that speaking and talking and telling your truth and being in an environment where people can listen to your truth and not be offended, that's, to me, where it starts.
I agree. And I feel like there's so much, we have so much in common. And right now it seems like everyone talks about the division, and I'm hoping, things will, clearly get to a better place. And George, we've talked about this before, so maybe you have a couple of words of wisdom.
Well, this is what I say, especially being in law enforcement, being a Black man, I walk that line of understanding both sides and being drawn. When I take this uniform off, I'm still a Black man. I'm not law enforcement. So I think what a lot of us do when it comes to law enforcement in general, we identify with the profession, that I'm a cop instead of being I'm an individual. Now, what law enforcement is going through, I'm going to talk about this just specifically from a law enforcement perspective. What law enforcement is going through when it comes to the alienation, the being singled out, the ostracizing, the being looked at once you get out the car as if you are a dangerous person. All those things that are happening in law enforcement, for what a few have done is my law enforcement peers don't like it. right? But just look at it this way. Those things that you don't like, those things that you're being singled out for, those things that you're being lumped into a smaller circle, I mean, a larger circle being lumped into the actions of a few, what you're experiencing is a bit of prejudice. And that's what the African American culture has been experiencing for hundreds of years. I walk down the street, I'm a cop, somebody locks their door because they feel that I'm dangerous. I get into an elevator, somebody moves over to the side because I look like I'm dangerous. You know, I'm walking down the sidewalk, somebody moves to the other side of the road because they feel that I'm dangerous. All the alienation, all the being ostracized, being looked at as if you are dangerous just because of what a small amount of people are doing, is pretty much the exact same thing. So now you are experiencing just a little bit of that. You can't say that you can't relate to the other side because you're experiencing it. Now what needs to be had is the conversation of how do we correct this? How do we go about changing the perception and ideologies of an individual, you know, and start, instead of looking at me as a Black man, look at me as an individual walking down the road. I'm more dangerous than somebody else. What makes me dangerous are my actions when it comes towards you. That's what makes me dangerous. But just the perception of me walking down the road, I'm more dangerous than anyone else. So we have to start changing the ideologies. We have to start changing what people actually look at. And that's coming from not only from a law enforcement perspective, that's also coming from an African-American perspective on we have to take control of our own image. We have to stop wearing our pants hanging halfway down our butts. We have to stop with the gold teeth. We have to stop going out here putting out that we are thuggish or accepting that term and then getting upset when we're judged like that. We need to take control of who we are. And once we start taking control of who we are and the images that are being presented about us, the thought process will start to change. But we have an issue now, and because we have the issue, who's going to be the first one to come forward to say, all right, you know what, there have been problems. This is what we need to do. I don't believe in defunding the police. What I do believe in is reform. There needs to be reform. Because over history, law enforcement has been involved in a lot of the atrocities that have happened to the African-American people over history. They were involved when it came to bringing back slaves, when it came to slave catchers. They were involved when it came to enforcing the Jim Crow laws. They were involved when it came to segregation. They were involved when it came down to peaceful protests in the 1960s when we were just trying to get our voting rights. They were involved when it came to going into Black neighborhoods, beating up individuals and leaving them there because they believed that, hey, you know what, we're cops and we can do this. They were involved when it came to getting false confessions from individuals and sending them to jail for crimes they did not commit. They were involved in this. And the difference is that when people went to complain, it was your word against mine. Now when people complain, they don't have to, they can record and upload to social media. So now, hey, you don't have to believe me, I have it on video. That's the change. So we have to be able to, in order to heal, we have to reveal. Law enforcement, we have to admit that, hey, those pillars that we were established on, even though there are some good, there are also some bad, and that bad is what we need to discuss in order to go out. When we take this Pledge of Allegiance, when we say that justice for all, for liberty and justice for all, we have to make sure that we're making that statement for everyone that's in this country.
Some great insights, and you have an incredible perspective too. So I think the important thing, and we have touched on this before, is opening the conversation and talking about it and not feeling like you can't talk about it, because that's the only way we learn. It's about educating each other and ourselves. And I mean, that's the thing for me, you know, as a marketer and a PR person, and Joy as well, like, we try to use, Joy has a very big platform. She tries to use her platform in a way that helps spread the word about important topics. So So yeah, we're really grateful. I mean, you both are incredibly inspiring, and Joy as well. I feel unworthy being on this.
Oh my goodness.
Seriously, that we've got lots of jugglers here and amazing parents and yeah, and athletes. So but I just want to thank you both so much for spending time with us. And Joy, I'll let you close off.
Sure. And I think overall, what we learned from both of you is, especially when we talked about your careers, is stepping up and taking control of your life. I have a little thing here in my office that says she designed a life she loves. I'm a big person of faith too, but I can't sit back and blame everything on God when things don't go right or I don't get where I want to get, because God helps those who help themselves, And so for both of you, George Anthony, when your change came when you didn't play victim, you said, no, I'm going to look at the things that I could have done different. And I'm going to make myself a better person. And I'm going to accept that responsibility. And that's when you jump out of the hamster wheel, right? And that's the most dangerous places when people play victim. They're never going to go anywhere. And then the same thing with you, Dr. Tiffany, you're like, I love what I'm doing right now, but I think there's more I can be doing. I have another passion, and I'm not going to use the excuse of I have kids, I have a busy career, I can't do this right now. I'm going to find a way to do it. And by golly, you're finding a way to do it. That's awesome. And it's so important, I think, when you get into that state of growth mindset, then the world really does open up to you, because it starts the momentum. And momentum is what you need to start the movement towards what you want. It doesn't have to be a huge step. Any step starts a momentum. And that's what we're after in our lives, for our loved ones, for growing, for, spreading the messages. Let's just start that momentum, like we're talking about, of listening to each other in this time of diversity and all these hard conversations. If people would just stop and listen, it would make all the difference, and that's, one of the lessons I just want to close. You both are so amazing. It's been an absolute privilege and humbling to be on here with you guys. And I'm saying that for Cindy as well, but thank you for your example. And I'm just excited to be halfway in the room with you guys so I can continue to learn from you.
Me too.
Well, thank you so much for having us. And
Thank you.
I love Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah, it's changed the
I
world.
appreciate you having me on here as well.
Yeah.
Brings us together.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.